James, this is a classic example, this passage, of how we reconstruct our ability to judge. This is transform how we treat our neighbor. Because let me tell you, you're going to be amazed. James's grace theology is shallow. Let's admit it, it's shallow. But he hits a home run here in the next couple of verses. Watch this. This is amazing. Apostle Paul would stand up and applaud this. So speak and do, 12, as those who will be judged by the law of liberty. Underline the words will be and write this out in the margin because I want to give you the Greek syntax on this. The English missed it. The English, again, says, so speak and so do as those who will be judged by the law of liberty. But the Greek says, so be and so do as those who want to be judged by the law of liberty. Live like people who want to be judged by the liberty that comes through the new covenant. Paul would have stood up and said, home run, James. Home run. Look at the next verse. For judgment is without mercy to the one that shows no mercy. Mercy triumphs, or in the Greek, is superior to judgment. Isn't that remarkable? You have a choice to make tonight. It's not just tonight. You're going to make this choice the rest of your Christian walk. And the choice is how you're going to judge your neighbor. And James says, speak and do. See that? Speak and do. What did he tell you in chapter 1? Let every man be swift to hear and slow to speak. Now he tells you speak up. But when you do, speak and do as people who want to be judged by the law of liberty. What else would you do? Speak and do as people who want to be judged by the Mosaic law. That's the opposite. You have a choice to make. How you deal with your neighbor is going to reflect how finished you think the work is. It really is. This is another lesson it's taking me a while to learn. How I deal with my neighbor, with my friend and my enemy, is a direct reflection of how finished I think the finished work is. And if I have trouble dealing with them, it is because in some respects I think they should be under some sort of performance when they're around me, which means I'm holding them to a standard that I don't want God to hold me to. And James says, when you speak and when you do, speak and do as a man who wants to be judged by the law of liberty. So let me give you this little chestnut. When you try to figure out how you ought to treat other people's problems, err on the side of mercy. Always. Start there every time. Err on the side of mercy. I always tried to do that as a pastor. When people came to me with stories, and man, they come with stories. And they got stories on each other. I err on the side of mercy. I've tried to learn that. Because there was a time I thought you err on the side of judgment. Man, you go after me, you gotta clean this mess up. Well, I err on the side of mercy. Give people 10 benefits of the doubt. Give them 100 benefits of the doubt. So, well, that's just tacit approval of the way people live. We're not talking about approving of the way people live. It doesn't have anything to do with approving of the way people live. You're going to live the way you want to live, whether anybody approves of it or not. And if you're not, you're faking yourself out. And someday you'll get sick of that and go do it anyway. And everybody in your life will wonder what happened to you. You're going to live the way you want to live. It's erring on the side of being merciful towards people rather than erring on the side of being judgmental. Where do I get that? Because James said, judgment is without mercy to the one that does not show mercy. Mercy is superior to judging. So if you had to choose, James said, which one would you choose? Mercy. Jesus, I'm not going to turn there. You go there on your own. In Matthew 9, Jesus is confronted by a group of Pharisees. They're really mad because Jesus and his disciples are eating with sinners. Oh God, you're having lunch with publicans and this is terrible. And we look at it and go, big deal. But in the Jewish world, to eat with someone was to say, I'm okay with you. And he's eating with prostitutes and tax collectors. And they're going, you're not supposed to be okay with these people. Now, here's what we would say: they're going to hell, and you don't go snuggle up next to someone's going to hell. What's going to rub off on you? And Jesus gives this bizarre quote from Hosea 6:6. I mean, he pulls this thing out of nowhere. Who quotes Hosea? And Jesus says, you fellas go home. This made them so mad they couldn't see. A carpenter's telling them to go study. He says, you guys go study and figure out what it means. I prefer mercy over sacrifice. And then that's Matthew 9. 3 chapters later in Matthew 12, there's another confrontation. I think this time they're mad because the disciples are eating and not washing their hands. Yeah. Ooh. And Jesus says, if you had went home and studied, you would have figured out what it meant. I prefer mercy and not sacrifice. That's amazing confrontation. That's Matthew 9 and Matthew 12. What's Jesus mean? The Father prefers a people who show mercy on their fellow man over a people that show God how much they want to sacrifice. Jesus was being argued with by men who spent day and night sacrificing for God and never showing mercy on their neighbor. And Jesus said, if you knew Daddy's heart, you would realize He couldn't care less about your sacrifices. He wants you to be merciful to your neighbor. And you guys have got it backwards. And do you know how many Christians have defined their Christianity by how much they're doing for God and very little about the mercy they give to the person that's unworthy? And we actually think it's okay because they haven't shown themselves worthy of mercy. They haven't been repentant. They haven't said they're sorry. They haven't showed up to church. We reconstruct the law to justify ourselves from forgiving people because they haven't asked for forgiveness. And I want you to go home and I want you to figure out what part of the prodigal son story the young man says, Dad, I'm sorry. And what'll blow your mind is he never does. Because Dad couldn't wait to show mercy. What a powerful passage. What a powerful passage.